The operating system that powers every Apple computer is called macOS, operating system appearing and behaving much differently today than it had over 30 years ago. The history of macOS goes back to 1984. Previously, using a computer meant understanding the abbreviated textual commands needed to interact with the command line interface of an Apple II or IBM PC. You no longer needed to understand how the computer worked, you simply used the machine intuitively. Move the cursor around your virtual desktop and select what you want. But Bill Gates, who recognized the Macintosh's significance, was troubled by just one thing. Why did Apple decide to keep the Mac's graphical user interface operating system for themselves? So Gates took it upon himself to create a competing operating system to macOS called Windows, which was released in 1985. Windows proved to be a huge success, with dozens of PC manufacturers purchasing licenses of the operating system to use in their hardware. By 1995, Microsoft was worth $6 billion, while Apple was on a slippery slope to bankruptcy. Apple's desperation became very clear as they began licensing the Macintosh operating system to third-party manufacturers, similar to what Microsoft had been doing with Windows. By 1996, the Macintosh was running on an operating system that hadn't been updated for 5 years. Despite multiple attempts at building a next-generation operating system, Apple had virtually nothing to show for it. Next had been developing an advanced object-oriented operating system that would provide Apple the foundation they needed to create a new OS for the Macintosh. macOS 8 was ready to be released. And if you're wondering how Apple was able to build a new operating system so quickly, it's because the initial release of macOS 8 wasn't much different from System 7. macOS 8 was a very influential release, with features like an updated hierarchical file system that continued to be used until macOS High Sierra. When it came to its operating system, there was sort of a mismatch. Because although macOS 9 was released a year after the iMac, it still featured an outdated user interface that stuck out like a sore thumb compared to the iMac's shiny, colorful design. The first of which was called Cheetah. Now, macOS 10 Cheetah was a very important release since it marked the beginning of a new era for the Macintosh operating system. In fact, it was such a monumental transition that Apple held a funeral for macOS 9 on stage. But there were some problems with Cheetah. First, the Aqua interface, while visually appealing, was a resource hog. Users also noted the lack of basic features like DVD playback and CD burning, which used to be available in macOS 9. Now, the following release, Puma, was a step in the right direction and was praised for introducing many new features that were missing from Cheetah, like CD and DVD burning, DVD playback support for more printers, and faster 3D performance. Jaguar was the next release, and it turned macOS 10 into a more refined and stable operating system. And it was when Apple began introducing applications and elements from iOS to macOS, like Notes, Messages, Game Center, and Notification Center. Not to mention Apple's Project Catalyst, which is designed to help developers bring iOS and iPadOS apps to the Mac. But when it comes to Catalina, I do want to issue a warning that it no longer supports 32-bit apps. That doesn't mean the two operating systems will inevitably become the same thing. It simply means Apple is concerned with delivering the best user experience possible.